Good evening. Welcome to the February 27th, 2018 meeting of the River Falls Common Council. At this time, I'd ask everybody to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Please have the clerk call the roll.
Bierstead?
Here.
Bjork? Here. Downing?
Here.
Gagne?
Here.
Morissette?
Here.
Odine? Here. Tolan? Watson?
Here.
All right. Next, we'll have the approval of the minutes from the February 13th, 2018 workshop and meeting minutes, as well as the closed session minutes.
So moved.
Second.
First and a second, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Approval of the bills of Mr. Bierstead.
Mr. Morissette, I move to approve payment of bills in the amount of $1,798,485.04, subject to the Comptroller's review.
Second.
First and a second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Okay, we come to the public comment section of the meeting this evening. I know there's a lot of people in the audience that like to talk about the hydros, but before I open it up for public comment on those, I would ask if there's anybody in the audience that has anything to speak about that's on the agenda or that's on their mind other than the hydros. I'd ask for those folks to please come up first. Anybody in the audience that has anything not on the agenda or not regarding hydros right now? Okay, seeing none, we move into what everybody's come for, discussion, I'm sure, of the hydros, so public comments. We're going to limit, like we did last time, public comments to 2 minutes. Councilmember Odine will keep the minutes, and she'll wave at you when you are approaching your 2 minutes, please. If you have comments that are similar to those, please consider deferring so that everybody gets a chance to speak. So at this time, I'll open it up for public comments. I'd ask you to please come up, sign in, and state your name and address, and make your comment. All right, Mr. Gilbert.
Neil Gilbertson of River Falls here. Live right here in town all my life. I honestly think if your dams are making us money free and we're spending money to take these dams down, it's no common sense. That's what I think. We got more things to spend our money on in this town, like the streets down behind Fox's there. Fix that dam in, that wall that's going to cave in someday. Spend your $1 million on that instead of these dams. Common sense. That's what I say. Thank you.
Mr. Gilbertson, did you get a chance to sign in?
No, I will though.
Please sign in, and thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Just to be clear, we will not have public comment or public hearing during when the agenda item comes up. So if you want to speak tonight about the hydros, this is your opportunity. I think this gentleman was next right there. I'm sorry. You'll be next, though. Yeah, go ahead and, sir, why don't you go ahead and line up behind there? We'll have you line up against the wall. Maybe that might be a good order.
My name's Adrian Amundson. I live at 310 North 4th Street here in River Falls. I'm not going to add anything new to what you already have, the information you've been given. I just know that there's a large contingent here that want to free the Kinney, and I just want the city councils to know that not everybody holds that position. Right now we're looking at relicensing the dam, and I think that would be a good move at this time. Keep this hydro developed electricity coming in. It's making money for the city right now. I think the only way I would agree with taking the dams down is if there was a fund established for the purpose of taking the dams down so that no public money would be used for that purpose, and that the city would be reimbursed for the lost revenue that those dams now generate. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Nathaniel Dodge. I live at 209 Hamilton Drive in District 4, and I would like to express my support for full restoration of the Kinnickinnick River through dam removal. I understand that there's some discussion about keeping the Junction Falls Dam until 2048, until the end of its usable life. And I would like to say I think that's a little too far away for myself personally, and I think for many young people. I mean, when you think about 30 years, I'll be hearing about that dam removal at my 50th birthday party. So that's a bit too long ways for me. So I understand the whole situation, and I understand you guys have a complicated decision, and I'll support whatever you guys decide. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nick Brevitz. I live in Stillwater, Minnesota, but I spend the vast bulk of my free time over here fishing in the three-county area, and I'm an aspiring fisheries biologist. I'd like to ask you to remove both dams on the Kinnickinnick River, and the biggest reason for that, if you look at the impoundments from both dams on the river, they are absolutely clogged with silt, and this is only going to get worse if you keep the Junction Falls Dam until 2048. Especially looking into global warming, large rain events are going to become more common. I think a lot of you remember the flood in July of 2015. It absolutely scoured out a lot of the streams here and it put a lot more silt into both of those impoundments. And if you keep that impoundment for 30 more years, that's going to lead to a drastic increase in the funds you will need to restore what used to be that impoundment when that dam is removed. In addition, you have a great resource here. You have, if you remove both these dams, you have 4 natural waterfalls right within the Glen Park area. This is unlike anything in western Wisconsin. The nearest areas with any amount of natural waterfalls, Douglas County, it's about 3 hours north of here. And I truly believe this would lead to a great influx of additional tourism into the area for that. It's a truly unique resource. And I feel that that would more than justify removing the dams. Thank you.
Thank you. Lauren?
Hi, Lauren Kaminsky, 1110 Wasson Circle. Born and raised here in River Falls, and I moved back here after college with my husband to raise our family because we love this community. Upon hearing about the license renewal in 2014, I became excited about the opportunity this could be for our city if we were to embrace the river as part of our downtown, which led to my involvement with Friends of the Kinney. Some have argued in favor of keeping the dams, touting them as renewable energy sources. They currently only provide 1 to 1.4% of the city's power, and they do so at a huge opportunity cost. The cost to our community of stagnating a flowing river right through the heart of River Falls. Surrendering the license on these 2 hydros and removing the dams is truly once in our lifetime opportunity. Reinstating a flowing river could revitalize our downtown area and is truly the best option for the health of the river. This is our chance as a community and your chance as our city council to embrace both the river and the falls in River Falls. I don't feel we can wait until 2040 or 2048 to see these changes. As a dedicated member of this community, I urge you to surrender the license and return the flowing river to our downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hanson, the junior.
Hello, City Council. Thank you for all your time on this, and also to the Kinney Corridor Project Committee, because I know there were lots of time and effort that went into a fairly difficult decision. In my opinion, one sentence of that resolution might need a slight tweak. We need to keep the option open for the ability to improve hydroelectric facilities in the future if the return on investment makes sense. We can't see the future, so if we make concessions on possible removal of the lower dam, then it only seems fair to make one adjustment to the wording on line 6. Line 6, as it currently reads above, says the city shall continue to pursue its renewable energy policies to create greater amounts of clean energy from other sources. It seems like removing the from other sources doesn't change the body of the structure, but also frees us up if something great comes along and we want to do some upgrades in the hydroelectric facility on the Junction Falls Dam. This is Wisconsin, not Arizona, so I don't know if solar is the best answer to every problem. I do feel strongly city taxes should not be used to destroy our debt-free money-making asset. If a small group acquires public funding for the removal of the lower dam, I think nothing should be progressed until the money for the complete Lower Powell Dam removal project is held in escrow. The amount held should not be a weekly based, best case dollar guesstimate, but an actual fact-based series of quotes for the real costs of not only dam removal, but also costs associated with the cleanup of the lake and the creation of a solid stream bed structure to prevent future flooding damage to the currently pristine Lower Kinney stream bed. It's easy to get the ball rolling, but once the dam is drawn down and the dam itself is breached, there's no turning back. We all know that the minute this project goes sideways or an unexpected problem develops, the eager, helpful private entities will drift away on the now muddied current that was once the Kinney, who will be left to clean up the mess. Make sure enough money is in place and accountable local people are named to financially back up their pet project. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Eric?
Good evening. My name is Eric Forward. I live at 603 Spring Street in the city of River Falls. I just want to take this opportunity to thank the council for taking on this very interesting issue, complicated issue, as well as all the work that's gone into this analysis by all the community members, as those in favor and those and against this. I think it's important to have a very community-based process, and I think that's what has happened here. So I would commend everyone that's been involved. And I'd just like to urge the council to vote in favor of removing the dams for stream restoration purposes. I think you've got an ecological opportunity here, you've got an economic opportunity, and a social opportunity. I think removing the dams is going to be a truly transformational opportunity for this city and the residents that are going to come after us. I think that when we think of green energy, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, yeah, it's green energy, but the green is all the algae that's in the impoundments. If we can get rid of that, we can open up the area based on the designs that were made by the committee. It's going to open up all sorts of opportunities for public use, enjoyment. It's going to improve the ecology, and I appreciate everyone's attention to this. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Councilman Morissette, members of the council. For the record, my name is Gary Horvath. I live at 623 West Pine Street here in River Falls. I'm currently the vice president of Trout Unlimited, and I did serve on the Kinney Corridor Committee. Just briefly, Trout Unlimited sent you guys a letter with the summary of our monitoring data. And our big concern is, if you look at that, the temperatures below the impoundments are nearing the critical temperature thresholds for trout. And so the early data 2026 for the Powell Dam, we feel is very important that we stick to that. As we mentioned in the letter, the 2048 date we feel is a little too far out. 2035 seems like a better alternative for us. We're also interested in working on the public-private partnership, which has been discussed. And if you have any questions on the monitoring summary, I'd be happy to try to answer that. Otherwise, I know you got a difficult decision, and thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Hi, I'm Tanya Schmidt. I'm at 622 West Elm Street here in River Falls. A little over 4 years ago, my family chose to move to this community for lots of wonderful things that happen here, and including the wonderful public Montessori and the co-op and the river, and we love it. We live very close to Glen Park. We enjoy our time on the river exploring and fishing. I also have a background in biology, and I want to stand behind the people who are saying that for the health of the river, it's better for those dams to go. And also backing up the touristy part that can really take place with making our beautiful river even more beautiful. Thank you for all that you do.
Thanks, Tanya.
Hi, I'm Allison Page, 430 Crescent Street, River Falls. And I'd just like to start by thanking the City Council and the Corridor Planning Committee for all the work that has been done. And I'm particularly excited that we have been able to coalesce and come to consensus as a community that one fine day the river will flow freely and the dams will be removed from the river. So that's a huge step for this community, and it's a wonderful vision for the community. I agree with the previous speaker who said probably the greatest expense to this is the opportunity cost. The faster that we can develop the corridor, the faster that we can make that a more beautiful place and an attractive place for visitors to come to, the better it's going to be for our community and our downtown businesses. But I was particularly moved when I'm from a large local family, as a lot of you might know. I'm 6 of 9 children born in River Falls, Wisconsin. My mom is now 92 years old. I'm also the secretary of the Kinnickinnic River Land Trust and been involved in the river efforts for quite a while. And I was bringing my mom up to date one day on the river and what's happening with the river and, you know, some of the things that are being planned for the future of the river. And my mom said, she's 92, and she said, I so hoped I would see those falls one day. And I would just ask the City Council to consider that. And might my mom, Lyda Haskins, be able to see those falls? Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Page.
My name is Patricia LaRue, and I've lived in River Falls for 50 years. I'm speaking to you as a member of the Kinney Corridor Committee. When reading the resolution, please take note of the resolution's specific language and target dates. With regard to Junction Falls, the resolution envisions that on or before 2048, the city will have stopped generating electricity, completed a 2-year drawdown of Lake George, modified Winter Street Bridge, reinforced the river abutments, removed the 150-year-old dam, which currently sits submerged behind the newer dam. We will have completed a 2-year demolition of the Junction Falls dams, followed by river restoration. All of that is to happen by a target date completion of 2048. This isn't a 2-year project. If all of that is to happen by 2048, the hydroelectric generators will be shut down in approximately 2043. If you back the target date up to 2040, generation is turned off in 2035. And if you back it up to 2035, you turn the generators off in 12 years. To arrive at the 2048 date, the committee talked about revenues created by generating, depreciation, and the solid condition of the dam. But we also talked about concerns of rising water temperatures on the Trout, how dam removal and stream restoration would be paid for. We talked about public and private partnerships and grant money available. We talked about regardless of who pays for it, some in the community don't want to lose Lake George. We talked about putting dates into the resolution, and we talked about not putting dates in at all. We took a lot of votes. But it was important to us that we hand to you a unanimous decision on how the resolution should be read.
10 seconds.
Oh, okay. 10 months ago, the Kinney Committee was told that this was a backwards horse race, that we all started at different positions, but we came to the finish line as one. We did our absolute best, and I sincerely ask that you adopt the timeframes placed in the resolution.
Patricia. Anyone else?
Hello, Dave Drewitzki, Director of the Kinney Land Trust and a resident of the town of Troy.
I'm really here because over 40 years ago, I wrote a grant to preserve the Kinney from Glen Park down to the new state park. We got the money, but Pierce County wasn't ready to form Parks Department, and we had to turn it back. The cost at that time was estimated to be $800,000. One of the reasons given for not proceeding was that development will never come here. Well, development is here. We have a 4-lane highway. We have unprecedented amounts of investment in the community. And but what brings them here in great part is the quality of life that we have. And it's the most precious portion of the quality of life is the river. So last time I mentioned a public-private partnership that we'd like to form. We think there's great merit in pursuing that. Whether it's, and I looked at your strategic plans for the city. I think we line up very well. I have a letter written addressing each point. And I just want to say that the Land Trust and a lot of the well-educated, energetic people in the community will work with you. But our biggest concern is the fact that the warming of the water has already occurred, and we don't think we can wait to the 2048 date. So thank you, and look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Dave. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman and members of the council, I'm Eric Amundson. I reside at 500 Marcella Court here in the city of River Falls. First, I want to thank all of you for all the time, excuse me, and the effort that you've put into this issue. One thing I think it's safe to say, and all of us can agree on, you guys are well informed on both sides of this issue. So, you know, for the last year or so, you have looked at both sides, and I guess the one thing that I want to mention is, you know, it is green energy, and several years ago, the city of River Falls and a previous council made a decision to put an investment in these dams for the future of the green energy and hydroelectric. You know, as of now, approximately, I believe, on the upper dam, we're about halfway through that life cycle on the life of that dam. So I think to, you know, proceed to remove anytime soon would be in error, as you know, right now we're getting the highest rate of our return on that investment. So I'm not going to pass anything out to you. You guys have seen more than enough information. I just want to thank you for your time and everything that you put into this, and especially to sit here patiently as a previous elected official. I know sometimes you have a lot of people to listen to, so thank you for what you've done and your listening. And I just hope that in moving forward with any decision that you have, that you do what's right for the city of River Falls. You know, whether it's keeping the dams or removing them, just do what's right for the future and what you think is best in regards to hydroelectric and the Kinney as well. So I'll accept any decision that you have, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Eric.
Hi, I just had a couple of questions. Do we know how much the FERC license is going to cost? What's the application fee for the FERC license?
During public comment, we usually we can ask clarifying questions, but we really can't engage in the back and forth.
Oh.
There is information in the reports that include that information, and I'm sure that Mr. Lobermeyer or Mr. Lucero would be willing to share that with you probably after the meeting.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Okay, so then I guess
Peter, could you state your name for the record?
Oh, sorry.
And your
Yeah,
address?
my name is Peter Rain, and you know my questions were, what is the cost of relicensing, right? So people think that they have this perception that water going through the turbines is a free energy source and that it's green, And, you know, my interpretation, and I would like people to think a little more deeply about that it's more like brown, right? It's not black. There's no carbon emissions happening as a result of that energy generation. But it's not green because we're paying the price of that stretch of water, which is now under the impoundment, which is getting baked and leading to ecological degradation. So it's not green energy. At best, it's brown. It's not black, but it is brown. And the cost of maintaining the dam, bringing the dam up to FERC standards, and the relicensing is a cost that the city will have to bear in order to realize those kilowatt hours.
10 seconds.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay. Seeing no one else coming forward, I have one comment for public comments from my seat. Please keep in mind that we've had a lot of snow. I think there's more coming. We've got hydrants that need to be dug out. If you have a situation where you need the fire department to be there, you don't want them digging out the hydrant before they put your fire out. So please adopt a hydrant in your neighborhood if you would, please. Anybody else on the council have any public comments? No? Okay, we're going to close the public comment section, and we're going to move on to the consent agenda. Number 2 is the acknowledgement of the following minutes: the Utility Advisory Board from 1/15/18, EMS Advisory Board on 1/8/18, Park and Rec Advisory Board on 1/17/18, Historic Preservation on 1/10/18, Plan Commission from February 6th, 18, Business Improvement District from 1/9/18, the Library Board from 1/8/18, and number 3 is a resolution in support of increasing the state limit on historic rehabilitation tax credits. Would anybody like to pull anything?
Mr. Council President, I would like to pull consent agenda item number 3.
All right, Mr. Downing is going to pull number 3.
I'd like to pull G.
And Mr. Gagne is going to pull 2G. Anybody else? All right, I'll entertain a motion for the rest.
I move approval of the consent agenda 2A through F.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. I do have just a quick comment about the Utility Advisory Board minutes, 2A. There were 4 council members present at that meeting. I believe they were myself, Mr. Gagne, Mr. Watson, and Mr. Bjork. They did not get included in the minutes, so I'd ask that the minutes be adjusted for that down the road and go forward. Anybody else?
Is there any objection by the motioner and seconder to the modification?
No.
Okay. All right. Okay, so we have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion carries. We're going to go back to Mr. Downing. You pulled number 3.
Number 3, resolution in support of increasing the state limit on the historic rehabilitation tax credit. I put this on the agenda. I want people to understand that our state's lost its tax credit. It went from $5 million down to $500,000, which is really unacceptable for a city like this that values its history so much. And the Municipal League is a bipartisan commission for all the cities in the state, and they are recommending going back to $3 million. I'm in support of their resolution, and I would urge other council members to support this resolution as well. With that, I move for approval of consent agenda item number 3.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Mr. Gagne, you pulled 2G.
I just pulled 2G to let the community know that we're recruiting for a library director. If you know anybody that has a master's in
librarian, feel free to have them go on the city's Facebook page or the city's website and look at the recruitment and apply. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I move for the approval of consent agenda 2G.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, now we're on to ordinances and resolutions. Number 4, resolution authorizing hydro relicensing. So tonight, I think before we do anything, we should first put this in motion. So does anybody want to make a motion on the resolution that's in our packet?
Mr. Council President, I move for the approval of the resolution authorizing hydro relicensing.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Now we'd have discussion. I'd like to just ask the council to consider a couple things. We have two amendments that were included in the packet tonight. We have 2 additional amendments that were handed out by other council members. And I think before we take any action on those amendments, I'd like to give the council an opportunity to have some discussion first. So I guess what I'd ask is that we all take a minute and have some discussion about where we think we are at or what we would like to see, and provide our other council members some feedback, if you so desire. And then after we're done with that, we'll go into addressing the amendments and any other amendments that might come up. So we could do this in any order. I guess I'd leave it open for anybody who'd like to go first and make their comments. I'll make my comments last. So
I'd like to, if we could, maybe start with talking about the amendments that were put in front of us, because I think that will create conversation that will be part of it if we could. So if I just, unless you think something else.
Mr. President?
Yeah, I guess what I'd like to do is we can discuss, certainly we can discuss the amendments, but rather than put them up for a vote right away, I'd rather have some discussion around them so that we can all hear about it. But you go ahead.
Well, I was reading through what Alderman Downing presented, and I think it makes a lot of sense. I have a hard time with this, envisioning what we're going to do without any private finances coming in and without it being in place. So what Sean has already, or what Alderman Downing has already shared in there, I think those are things that need further discussion and thought process before we can approve what is before us.
Are you addressing the
new
new handout?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe Mr. Downing, I haven't had a chance to read it as in depth as I'd like, and I'm not sure the other council members did, but do you want to just give a brief being the key word there, brief overview of what your handout was?
My proposed amendment talks about risk management and what fiscal responsibility means. It outlines the goals. A lot of them were discussed in our public comment today about what is appropriate and how we can meet those goals. I'm more willing to discuss it once we talk about the amendment, though.
Okay. Anyone else?
Mr. President?
Sure, go ahead.
If I may make some general comments about it. At last council meeting, I talked a little bit about my appreciation for the committee, the Kinney Corridor Committee, and all the work they've done gathering information and opinions and ideas from everyone in the community. And I just want to thank all of you for coming here and for communicating with me and the rest of the council over the last year or so. I really appreciate that, and it's made me realize that River Falls isn't really the river, it's the people. And you've all shown how dear this city is to you, and the whole process, I think, makes this a better place. That being said, I appreciate the framework that the Kinney Corridor Committee has placed in front of us, and I think that, as Ms. Page remarked, the resolution says, yes, the dams are coming out. It's just a matter of when, and probably how. So I see us as discussing some of those options here this evening. So, thank you.
Mr. President?
Mr. Gagne?
I'd like to echo some of what Diane has said. You know, I said this at the last meeting as well. I appreciate all the people coming together, the Kinney Tech Talks, getting out in the community. I mean, we really do have a great community that can come together and work through the details and really see and cast a vision for what they're looking for and what they want in their community. And I commend everybody in River Falls and the surrounding townships for that. You know, the Corridor Committee really has a big job to do themselves. They've got a job of looking at everything from the top of from the north to the south and everything in between, and all the little finite details that go along with that, and one of those being hydroelectric dams. I know they spent a lot of time and effort going back and forth and how they wanted to bring this before the council and utility advisory board and the people of River Falls and business owners, stakeholders, everybody that's involved. They really got down to the nitty-gritty detail and brought us a great resolution. With that being said, I think the general framework, I agree with it. I do believe that the dates in the framework do represent a good happy medium amongst everybody in the city of River Falls. I know 2048 seems like a long time, and it is to some of us, right? You know, my daughter, she was born 3.5 years ago, and it seems like yesterday that was the case. Well, you know, time flies when you're having fun, and I know we got a lot of great people in this community, and they've come all around the Kinney, and there's a lot of sediment there that want to see a free-flowing river, and you know, I've been one of the people say that as well. It's just a matter of when we get there, and I think we have a fiduciary responsibility to our residents to see the investment through. Like one gentleman said, we are getting the full investment back on our full payment back on our investment by reaping the benefits from the hydroelectric dams, as well as getting the $950-some thousand that we just put in 1990 into those dams. That's a lot of investment that a previous council and the city came around that and saw that vision as a whole. You know, there's opinions on both sides of the issue, but I think the Corridor Committee really did a great job, and you know, outside of just one thing on here, the only thing that I could see potentially looking to change would be a on 5, and that's something I'm just bringing up for conversation.
Yep, that's fine.
You know, we're saying that every expenditure over $5,000 needs to come back before the city council. You know, I get the site of the committee on that. So $5,001 seems like a lot of money, but when you're looking at a hydroelectric dam or a $42 million budget and, you know, other things that go into play in the city of River Falls, $5,000 is a pretty small amount, and when you think about the big picture. So, you know, what I'd like to see on that, and I'm not making an amendment, it's just open for conversation at this point. You know, I'd like to see anything over $5,000 brought to the Utility Advisory Board, and then at that point, anything over $15,000 brought to the City Council. Here's my reasoning. Back in 2015, we had a little bit of maintenance done on Junction Falls Dam. The project was $10,500, okay? That was the contract. And anything over the contract was to come back to the Utility Advisory Board, and the council got a memo on that, kind of identifying why it went over. Well, it's just like you take your car into the shop. Sometimes you take it in, they say, hey, this is what's wrong with it. And then they find out a bearing's loose or something needs to be replaced or modified. So it cost about $4,000 more in that project, so about 14 some change, okay? It's kind of a waste of staff's time, you know, and maybe I said that wrong, but it's very hard when staff got a lot of stuff on their plate to every time something takes $5,000 to come back before the Utility Advisory Board and then have to wait for the next council meeting. And then you have to notice that before the public. There's a whole lot of things that have to happen in the middle of that. So I think at a $5,001 limit, anything over that to go to the Utility Advisory Board, and then once it hits that $15,000 limit, I really think that that would be more practical in the sense of how government operates and how this works. That being said, anytime the council gets an agenda of every single board in the city of River Falls. That's something we worked towards in the last 5 years to get that, make sure that we're kind of keeping up with what they have going on. So if they have this item on their agenda, the council gets it before their meeting, as well as we get the minutes like we approved tonight of every board meeting. So it's not like it would go unnoticed. And I also have my utmost respect, and I trust our staff to bring that before us. If there's something wrong with the hydros or any other thing in the city, they bring it before us if there's a concern. And I think they've overall done a good job of that. And they've been pretty transparent. I mean, you can go to our website, you can get about just anything on the City of River Falls you want. You approach just about anybody in the staff, and they're going to get you that information. So that all being said, I think that would just be a practical sense.
Okay. Anybody else?
I have two quick comments I want to go over. I just wanted to thank everyone who contacted me and apologize to the ones I didn't get a chance to get back to. Two things I want to be understood before we get into this. The land will not be privatized. The city will maintain property, and that the city will maintain control of the project, which is understood, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right.
Mr. Watson, Mr. Bjork?
I would, in terms of general comments, like to thank everyone again for being here, and also thank the City Council for its work on this project and the Corridor Planning Committee. And it's been really inspiring to see all the energy and excitement around this possibility. I think the fact that the community has come together over a vision of both dams coming out and river restoration is really, you can't underestimate how significant that is for this community. And so the general framework and there's really a lot of good stuff in this resolution, and I fully support almost everything in it. I have an amendment to bring up that I think will make it better. Which we'll talk about in a minute. But my hat's off to everyone who's been communicating, making their phone calls, and letting their representatives know how they feel on this issue. It's been really helpful to get a chance to listen to what you've had to say. So thank you.
Yeah, I would like to just say, when I moved back to River Falls 4 years ago, I moved back because this is my hometown. My family's been here for well over 100 years, and I've always considered River Falls my hometown. Even when I was living in California, this is where I knew I was going to put my final resting stone down. But when I moved back, I knew this was a situation that was going to be coming about, and I really did try my hardest to try to listen to both sides of the story on this, because there's lots of facts here and facts there, and some of them are misleading, and there's some groups that have really gone out and worked really hard, and boy, they have to be commended how they've campaigned and worked and riled the troops. Maybe riled the troops is not the right word, but rallied the troops to get the communications out to us, the council people. But I'd also like to say there's the group of people that did not have a focus, or not, I shouldn't say a focus, but a central group that as many emails as I got back after a campaign effort to make sure that there was emails to get the dams out, I had that many emails and phone calls plus saying, please keep the dams. And I had people that said, can I come over to your house and talk? Can you come over to my house and talk? So as much as we might think that there's this big group that are all about taking the dams out, there's an equal group that are saying keep the dams in as well. So let's make sure that we don't, because nobody's going to win everything tonight. There's just no way. But whatever the final decisions are, let's take that and move forward and stay a strong community. I moved back here because of the people here and because of what we have to offer. And the river, as it is right now, is part of what it is. Can it change? Great, it can change. But again, it's the people that make River Falls.
Well, the only thing that I would like to add to what everyone has said here, and by the way, I also say thanks because I probably got more emails in the last 48 hours than I have the rest of my life. So even some from California and Florida and who knows where. But the other thing I'd like everybody to kind of remember, we have a lot of other things on our plate too, and this is obviously a very important topic to all of you, and it is to us as well. But we have to balance this with all the other things we need to do here as well. So for me, this is a financial decision on behalf of the citizens of River Falls, and so whichever way this falls, we'll see what happens tonight. But it's got to be part of the bigger picture for us because we're responsible for everything here. So just wanted to remind everyone of that.
Okay. Anybody else have anything before I make my comments? No? Okay. Well, first of all, like many people up here tonight have already done, I want to recognize the work of the committee. A lot of them are here tonight in the audience, and I can't thank you enough for the work you've done over the last 18 to 24 months. It was a huge undertaking, and I know it was difficult at times, and you did not all agree on the terms, but you all support it. And that's an important piece for me. And I hope our community tonight is going to take the same approach of, I may not agree with whatever comes out of tonight, but I support it and want to move on. My biggest fear with this topic has been that this has become a bit divisive in our community, with only one or the other side. There's no middle ground, and that's not healthy. We've got that on the national level, we've got that on the state level, and we do not need that in River Falls. So please keep that in mind tonight as we all walk out of here. I think back to when Don Ness, the mayor of Duluth, was here at the Tech Talk and spoke about the project he did with the city, and the things that he said were there is no right and no wrong. There's no for sure way to do it. There's no wrong way to do it. He really focused on doing what was best for his community. I may have taken a little bit of poetic license. I'm not sure I'm quoting him exactly, but that was the thing that I took away from Mr. Ness. The other thing that I want to point out is that I want to talk a little bit about the resolution and what that means and what that is in terms of city jargon, if you will. I think a lot of people think that the resolution is similar to an ordinance, and an ordinance is a law. We pass an ordinance on parking. That means that is the law. The resolution is directional, and it is somewhat flexible. We are directing staff tonight, based on the resolution, that would direct the staff to relicense the hydros. That's what that direction is. It allows for flexibility in the future. Dam removal will happen at some point in the future. That's been decided. That was the direction from the committee, and that's what will happen down the road. But this is not a law, and this is more subject to flexibility. I think a lot of people think that if we pass this resolution tonight, there's no amendments to it, there's no flexibility, and it'll be set in stone. I said at the last council meeting, I was really concerned about having dates in there, but I understood why they were in there, because there's so much in the future we do not know about. So that's a comment I wanted to make about those, just to make sure everybody's on the same page there. There's been some talk tonight about public-private partnership. I am wholly behind that. I think that is the answer for how we handle the corridor. I think the public-private partnership will implement the next step that the Kinney Corridor Committee has put in place. They will be a body, I hope, that will have some ability to go out and get grants. I think we've heard some sentiment tonight from Councilmember Downing and the rest of us that no public funds will be used for this project, for the hydro removal. So that public-private partnership would remain under council approval. It would not be, we would not abdicate all authority to that public-private partnership in my vision. And so I'm looking very forward to having that go forward. They would be responsible for fundraising, the timing, the implementation, and making recommendations back to the city council about the corridor and their charge. So that would be the hope for that committee. As far as amendments go, again, I support the amendments that are on the table. I with the exception of Mr. Downing's, only because I haven't had a chance to fully read it and understand it yet. But you know, there's 3 amendments that have been put in front of us. I support those. I support the resolution because I believe that the dates will be whatever they are in the future. And so there's been some talk. I think Mr. Amundson, not to point you out, Eric, but you know, mentioned that the councils in the past did things that they thought were right, and they moved forward, and things change. Leaving, you know, putting hamstring or putting a pair of handcuffs on a future council is not something I'm interested in doing. I want them to have the flexibility for whatever situations arise, you know, whatever the situation is. So that's, I guess those are my comments tonight. And with that, I guess we'd open it up to entertaining the amendments that were presented. And if there's concurrence, I think we'll start with Mr. Downing's amendment that was put in the packet. If you would like to put that into motion, I would turn that over to you.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to it first real quick.
Yep.
And basically it states that general fund cannot, our tax levy can't be used for this project. Scott, could you read that real quick, the amendment, so everyone can read it for what it is?
As a sentence to section 2, the paragraph would read, the corridor planning process shall establish a fiscally responsible financing plan to implement the recommendations of the final corridor plan, including ultimate dam removal and stream restoration. The amendment is, it is understood that fiscally responsible financing means no use of local general property tax levy.
And I'm going to talk to that real quick. And I want people to kind of bear with me because my small amendment plays a much bigger part to my bigger amendment I'm going to talk about later. But here, risk management was never talked about in the planning process to the extent I desired. I know the committee will have time to discuss ways of doing this. However, before we make any immediate decisions that may be putting the cart before the horse, we need to understand that the impact this will have on the taxpayers who are residents of this city and mitigate them here today so there is none. And it is clearly understood that if the promise of being financially responsible is not honored, that there will be no bargain. Before we take any steps further, we need to define what fiscally responsible means and how risk management plays a part in this. I won't accept any plan that does not have total cost accounting in it, where the losses to the city, as described in my amendment and my other amendment, are given back to the city in full payment. This comes from the old saying, if we can't do this right, don't do it at all.
So, Mr. Downing, do you want to, I think this would be a good time, if you want to put this in the form of a motion, or I'm sorry, put this in the form of an amendment to the motion that, to the resolution that's in front of us.
I make a, let's see here. I'll entertain a motion to approve, or my first.
Make a motion.
Yes.
You make a motion, go ahead.
I so move.
You got to tell us what it is.
Oh, I move to approve the First Amendment I had written out for no general use of the tax levy.
Second.
Okay, we
So
have,
just to clarify, I'm moving as a second for number 2, the corridor planning process shall establish a financial responsibility financial plan to implement the recommendations of the final corridor plan, including ultimate dam removal and stream restoration. The amendment added is, it is understood that fiscally responsible financing means no use of local general property tax levy.
and Mr. Downing, that was your intention?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a first and a second, and we'll entertain discussion now.
Mr. President?
Yep.
I'm Frank. I don't want removal of the dams to raise our tax base, raise our taxes. And I am very much in favor of a public-private partnership to find the funds to do this. However, I want there to be some flexibility where if it makes sense for this council or future council to use some of our general property tax levy to complete something or to do something that's related to the dams, that they've got that flexibility. So while I appreciate the sentiment, I will be voting against this amendment.
So my discussion with that would be that, you know, I like the flexibility as well. I do think that the fiduciary responsibility will be on the private-public partnership when so created. You know, we've heard from many stakeholders, folks here that are interested in seeing this through. Some of them have said that they have funds available and can get funds available, as well as potential grant money. And I know with any grant, there's a match, right? So where that extra money comes from them stakeholder groups or the general public that want to donate, you can go do a GoFundMe page, you can do whatever you'd like. I know it sounds kind of funny, but in that sense, that's kind of what you can do. And that's where that extra match money could come from. And I think with the backing that we've seen during this whole process, I think we could raise that money pretty easily.
Yeah.
Okay, any other discussion?
Would it be appropriate for me to bring up my next amendment because of how it plays?
Get your amendment on the table, and we've got a motion and a second, so we'll have to have discussion. And
I like it. I think it makes sound sense.
I am not against what this is saying, but I also am concerned about, you know, putting ourselves in a box, and I know this is probably going to, you know, so, you know, there's a little bit of a back and forth here. You know, if it's limited to the property tax levy as written, I think I can probably go along with that. There are other sources of income that the city has that or may have in the future that I think might be appropriate to put towards this, and I wouldn't want to go any further than this specific amendment along these lines.
okay.
Can I ask a question? Then, Sean, if we agree that we're not going to use tax levy, what other sources in your mind then would we be looking to come up with? Because to Chris's point, if we need to do something and there isn't somebody there with a handout, what do we do?
Well, I got that described in my next amendment,
Okay.
so I'm waiting to speak to that.
Yeah, that's tough.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Well, we're looking at partnerships with federal and state grants, ultimately private funders, nonprofits, and fundraisers by private individuals. So, and they absolutely will be able to raise those, I believe, funds that are necessary.
And if we go back to what the mayor said just 2 weeks ago, he said that he envisions that there would be no city tax levy money used at all. So he made that commitment and promise to the residents 2 weeks ago at this very council chamber.
Correct.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right, so we're going to vote on the amendment. And the amendment is, again, it's on section 2. And the change in the wording is, it is understood that fiscally responsible financing means no use of local general property tax levy. Okay, so that's what we're voting on. All in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
No.
Okay. So we have 5-2, passes 5-2. Okay. Next, we'll go on to Mr. Watson's amendment that he offered in the packet, amendment number 2. And I would assume, Mr. Watson, you want to put that in motion?
Yes,
Okay.
Mr. President. Fellow council members, I'd like to, I make a motion that we amend section 5, or V as it is in the resolution. This is a section that talks about the time period for Junction Falls dams, and I'd like, you have this in your packet, but for the audience out there, I'd like to read this. The city will take necessary steps to remove the Junction Falls facilities and complete associated stream restoration. And this is the amendment targeting a time period from 2035 to 2040. If the trend, and this is back to the original language, if the trend of ecological conditions on the Kinnickinnic River has degraded to a point where the need for the project becomes more immediate, and to continue amending, an earlier date may be chosen. The city and stakeholder organizations will form a public-private partnership to seek funds for this and other river corridor projects. And then the original language, and I'll leave it to Mr. Gagne, to change anything from here on out. Any future hydro or dam-related expenditures over 5,000 shall be brought to the Utility Advisory Board and City Council for review and approval. So again, the amendment says targeting a time period from 2035 to 2040 for the removal of the Junction Falls facilities, and that the city and stakeholder organizations will form a public-private partnership to seek funds for this and other river corridor projects.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion from Mr. Watson and a second from Councilmember Odine. Time for discussion.
Question. Can you
Yep.
expound on your rationale? Thank you.
So, two main things here, and I think, or three. The first thing is, the reason why I'm here doing this tonight is for the health of the river. And my goal is to restore the biotic integrity of this river to the way it was created originally. Maybe not. Anyway, you get my drift. And you know, that really means taking care of the river in River Falls. And, you know, I think there's just been an outpouring of support for that. So that's the reason, in relation to the dates, to get to your question, my conversations with city staff have, I've been told, and I believe this is true, that the mechanicals, not the cement portion where we put a bulk of money into the upper dam, but the mechanicals of the dam, the upper dam, the Junction Falls Dam, will reach their end of life in this 2035 to 2040 range. So in my opinion, what we're doing here with this resolution is simply recognizing reality. The dams are probably not going to last until this dam is not going to last until 2048. We're going to end up spending money on the mechanical portions of the dam in order to keep it up to speed. Moreover, you know, if we go to FERC and we tell them that we're going to keep running this dam for another 30 years, or that we may do that, I can guarantee you there is going to be a laundry list of things that they're going to want us to do to that facility that is going to go well above $5,000, $15,000, $25,000, or even $100,000 worth of effort. And just to mention one thing, I got some information today from our utility director, but this is something that's come up within the utility department. You know, simply installing a fully automated grate to automatically clean the intake into the upper Junction Falls Dam, the upper dam, is going to cost between $75,000 and $125,000 for one. You know, that's nothing to do with the Powell Falls Dam. So, you know, and we can go on and on like that, and I don't want to get into a whole laundry list. My main point is, you know, if we're going to sit here and say that we're going to keep this hydro going for another 30 years, we're sitting here telling you that we're going to be willing to spend a bunch of money on it. And I think many of us feel, and I think it's fairly well borne out, is that projects like this get more expensive as time goes on. And so the longer we put this off, the more expensive it's going to cost. And as we've heard from our community, I think the overwhelming sentiment is that, and from the committee, is that, yeah, this dam, you know, we want to see this river free flowing. So my feeling is, you know, let's cut our losses in a reasonable time frame. I think there are reasons to continue for a while yet. I'm not suggesting right now at this table that we don't relicense the hydros. I'm saying that 2035 to 2040 is a reasonable time frame, is a judicious is judicious with our funds, and that it's just a smart thing to do. So that's my answer to your question, and I think in my mind, it makes a lot of sense.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Watson, so the way it was written before, where it says restoration 2048 unless funding is available to complete the removal of facilities and associated stream restoration by a date no earlier than 2040. So really what you're trying to do is just move it from 2048 to saying 2040 would be the latest. And
right.
Okay. And then someplace in here it said unless funds were earlier. So, but if, so you're just trying to gain another 8 years or 10 years roughly?
Correct. I'm happy to talk more, but I want to give everybody else a chance to speak too.
Would there be an opportunity for me to reconcile my second amendment with what you're saying, Councilmember Watson?
No, because we've got a motion and a second for an action on the table. So unless you want to offer a friendly amendment, which Mr. Watson I think would have to accept, I think it might be clearer if we just stick to the amendments as we march through. But that would be my.
Okay, I'll offer up this. I would hope that if I'm supportive of what your suggestion, that the rest of the council could look kindly upon my second amendment. The rest of it, I'd be willing to support what you're saying.
Okay.
If I may speak to your amendments, which I'm in.
You want, Diane?
If I may speak to Mr. Watson's amendment, which I'm in favor of, one of the differences is that it's a target date, and which I think is useful because there's nothing in it that would prevent it from happening sooner if we needed to take it out sooner. So it's a target date and very flexible, but gives us something a little more immediate to shoot for.
Mr. President?
Yes.
You know, I have the same sentiment. You know, I think the dates were pretty well drafted by a committee that we appointed. You know, yes, not everything in there is perfect, and yes, we've made some amendments, and we're changing a little bit of that, but that's kind of our role. We have to make sure that we're doing this correctly, and I appreciate the sentiment of going to 2035 and 2040. But, you know, I've heard from people equally on both sides. You know, there might have been a little bit more backing and PR and advertising on one side, so I probably got a little bit more input from one side versus the other. But I think when you boil it down, all input is important, not just one left, right, middle. We got to take that information and do what's best for the city of River Falls in the end, and I think we're getting to that point, right? And like Diane said, this is a target date. If we stick with a 2048, there's nothing that says we can't go back, or a future council can't come back and speed that up if they have to. But this kind of sets it in stone that, you know, one side gets their date of, hey, it's going to be removed. But at the same point, we've got staff time and we've got a lot of other stuff going on in the city. And we've got a lot in the next 5-10 years to really focus on. So, I mean, and we've sat through strategic planning and really kind of figured out what we're going to do in the next 10 years or 5 years. And this would take a huge bulk of that time if we tried to do this in 2 years, which it just wouldn't happen because there's drawdowns that have to happen. There's, you know, and why wouldn't we want to get the most out of this investment that we can, but move towards the removal and fundraising and let that private partnership do its thing in the meantime. So I'm in support of leaving it as it was written.
I want to see this 100% privately funded. I feel if we wait too long, we will not secure that private funding. It'll fall on the back of the taxpayers who live in the city. If it's not moved up to at least 2035 or 2037, we'd be making a very big mistake and not secure the funds that we need to do this properly. That's why I'm in favor of a sooner time date, but I'm okay with 2035 or 2037.
And going on to what Alderman Downing said, I really think with what you have here written, Sean, he's talking about a 2037 removal date, but that's encouraging to get that private fund. So in a sense, I'm in favor with what Alderman Watson has to say here, But I think we're, in a sense, we're getting the cart in front of the horse, not on purpose, but if we were looked at Alderman Downing's first, I think there's some credence to this that would help solidify Alderman Watson's and make it that they're in conjunction. It's like boom, boom, you could win on both situations.
Okay, well, that's movement. Didn't see that coming.
Mr. Downing, why don't you just talk some more about your amendment in general, and let's hear what you have to say.
Is it okay if I read it?
Yep, go ahead, Sean.
As shared by the mayor at the February 13th council meeting to the citizens of River Falls, it is a goal of his, and hopefully this council and future councils, that no use of tax levy money will be used towards the elimination and removal of Powell's Falls Dam and or the Junction Falls Dam, and that this council and future councils will be fiscally responsible and demand that private fiduciary take the lead and provide the financial resources for this project. To meet this promise, it is assumed if 2048 was the targeted removal date for Junction Falls Dam, we would not get the private funding needed to procure the necessary monetary requirement, effectively tying the hands of grant writers for federal, state, corporate individuals, and various other non-for-profit group funds, and that this potential perceived delay could cause stakeholders to lose interest and leave the cost to be incurred by the city and its residents. Leaving the cost to the taxpayers of the city of River Falls could result in higher expenses for the city's residents, and thus this effort should reduce and eliminate as many risks as possible for the citizens of the city of River Falls. Whereas the goal should be to best financially benefit the citizens of River Falls, and the use of their taxes paid will improving the city of River Falls for them, it is intended that expenses will occur in a fiscally responsible way at a zero expense to the city and its residents, and in a timely fashion as shared in this grand bargain. Whereas Section A, it is understood that total cost accounting will be used to account for unforeseen costs, damages, and losses during and after the dam's removal process and throughout the project's entirety. These total accounted costs will be added to the total projected costs of the dam's removal, then to be paid by outside sources within the time parameters to be shared, and that will allow for the totality of costs to be met and paid in a timely manner as directed by the city administrator for both dams costs reflected within the project and costs occurred up to 2 years after the complete dams removal project are completed. Section B, the total cost accounting total of Section A will be added to the lump sum total that will be billed for complete dams removal of both dams incurred during and after this process, including for a period of up to 2 years after the completion of the dam removal projects for structural damages, soil erosion, additional sediment removal, piping removal or relocations, other external costs that may directly affect the project or surrounding area, and or any negative cost impact on the city as deemed by the mayor, city council, and or city administrator. Whereas we are requiring the private fiduciary as a whole to be bonded at a minimum for the total cost estimates as listed above in both sections A and B. Whereas the city is to also be compensated for the loss of hydroelectric power revenues for the best guess expected lifespan of each dam removed. The city administrator shall add the total value of what the expected revenues of each dam would have been to the project as noted in Section A to reimburse the city for the lost revenue generated by each of the current city hydroelectric facilities as part of the total cost accounting. The revenue sum of each facility would be paid to the city before the removal of each dam. It is understood that zero cost to the city may mean quicker implementation times to remove the dams, whereas longer implementation times may mean higher costs to the city. Whereas we are recommending the goal of zero costs to the city, this means City of River Falls residents will not pay directly up front or in the long run for the removal of the dams. It is believed private investors would pay for the complete dams removal process if an assumed shorter time frame of dam removal would occur, and that these potential private investors may invest in a dam removal immediately if given the opportunity. Whereas with this agreement, the project may get the proper private funding it needs and not tie the hands of those procuring the funding to complete this project. Whereas, if money for dam removal for Powell Falls Dam are met from outside sources, as to this agreement, the Powell Falls Dam can begin to be removed in 2028. Whereas, the city believes a minimum of 9 years must occur between the removal of Powell Falls Dam and the removal of Junction Falls Dam to allow for proper data collection and studies to occur. Whereas, if monies for dam removal for Junction Falls are met from outside sources as to the agreement and a minimum of 9 years has occurred since the complete removal of Powell Falls Dam, then Junction Falls Dam can begin to be removed in 2037. Whereas if terms outlined as written here are not financially paid for before the target dates above of 2028 for Powell's Falls Dam and 2037 for Junction Falls Dam, this resolution becomes null and void.
Okay, so that's a lot to digest.
And Mr. Mayor, or Mr. President, sorry. You know, I love the sediment, and like you said, there's a lot to digest. And, you know, I wish I would have had this a lot earlier before the meeting to really kind of go through and look at all the different intricate pieces. I mean, it's, my question is, how would we move forward with something like this on such short notice?
Vote.
Councilmember O'Dean?
Well, I would.
Without understanding it is my problem.
Oh, I can answer any questions. I'd love to explain if you want.
I think the way I understand it is the ultimate goal of this is the 2037 date and fiscal responsibility. Is that correct?
We do need the loss of the hydroelectricity to be reimbursed to the city as a promise to our taxpayers that we are doing right by them.
I think that I think that's a noble sentiment, but I think that being fiscally responsible. Remember, this is an aspirational document, and I think that it further. I mean, we could even, as a council, come and make a further addendum to whatever we pass tonight. But while I appreciate all your detail, I think getting into how we account for things is a little too much detail for for the policy decisions we're making tonight. And I would perhaps can I make well, never mind, we've got an amendment in front of us. I won't mess with that.
I cannot support anything that in my view, will not be fiscally responsible to my constituents in District 1. And this is my bargain here. If this passes, so is 2035. I'd be in favor of that.
I think what you're trying to say, Sean, is that you want to make sure that we live up to what the mayor promised 2 weeks ago, that
yes,
the residents of this city are not going to be responsible for the removal of the dam, and that there's not going to be any added taxes or levies that are going to be required for this, and that private funds are going to be used to do this. And what you're trying to say, I think, is if we say, go ahead and get those private funds, or you get those private funds, you can even get the dams out quicker into the years, such as Alderman Watson is requesting, in 2035 to 2040. That becomes a reality. You show me the money, and you can do it. You don't show me the money, it's not happening.
Correct.
Okay.
That is exactly what I'm saying.
And I'll make a comment here. I probably should wait till the end, but there are pieces of this that I can support. I certainly support your second to last whereas, where it says, you know, can be removed after 2037. I support the fiscal responsibility, the fiscal take on this, but similar to Councilmember O'Dean's comments, there's just so much here, Sean, that I haven't had a chance to digest it, and I don't know that in a resolution, I mean, this is almost taking, again, my comments earlier about the difference between a resolution and an ordinance, this is almost taking ordinance type shape. And I don't know that we should be going down that road with that. I think the sentiment is shared by, I think, just about everybody up here and the mayor, that we want a public-private partnership to go out and find the funds. I think there's some consensus up here that you know, we could support the 37, and I'm not sure if Mr. Watson wants to amend his motion or is willing to, I don't know. But I think there's pieces of this that we could support and get us there. It's a question of what we want to do next. And to be honest with you, I guess we've still got Councilmember Watson's motion on the floor.
Let me
question, Sean or Hal. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I guess I would just make the comment, and I do appreciate what you've laid forward here, and also I'm glad to hear that you'd like to have the dams come out earlier rather than later, or the Junction Falls Dam specifically. I think you've already won your point in the last amendment. That's the way I read it. I mean, basically, we just voted to say that no tax levy is going to support this project. So I appreciate, and understand you're wanting to get down into the guts of that. But I think we've got, a lot of years, to decide how we're going to, what limitations and how exactly we're going to account for the funds and this and so on and so forth. So I think just in the spirit, of all of us working together, we're certainly on board with that. That's the way I feel, but I really don't. I'm kind of a little nervous about adopting this 3 pages worth of amendments. I tried to keep my amendment really simple and really clean, and I really appreciated when your amendment was put forward in the packet, how really super straightforward that was. And I thought in terms of a policy like we're moving forward with here, I thought that made a lot of, that made sense. I didn't agree with it completely, but, I thank you for making it that way, and it's just, so I'm a little nervous about kind of jumping down this rabbit hole here.
I think the bigger rabbit hole would not be getting the energy back from our hydros. We'd have a lot of very disappointed residents who live in the city who've paid money in already for full working, already paid off hydros, and to just say that's not important to them would be forgetting them and the commitment this city once made to them. That's why this is going to be complex, Politics is messy, but this is as good as it gets. This amendment is comprehensive, and it makes up for anything that the committee might have not gotten because of risk management was not considered in its entirety. Now, it's not meant to be an ordinance, but it's meant to be a guiding principle of how to best do this. That's why I support my amendment.
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Kennedy, go ahead.
I think the point was brought up too, that this can always be added later as an addendum. And I'd encourage you to give us time on that and maybe ask the mayor to put it back on, or find another council member to put it back on the ballot or on the agenda and bring it back before the council in the future.
I think that would also allow the public to take a look at it, because you can read it out, but it's a lot easier to digest it sometimes for people like me if I actually see it in print.
I'm a bit apprehensive in the sense of, we're promising the taxpayers something that they don't have yet, and we're not getting anything for it. We're looking at a group that's going to do bonding. The bonding should include losses as well as loss of the hydroelectric electricity. This is a direction we can take as a council tonight. And I would support 2035 if we actually got that direction tonight.
Is there a way you can boil this down? Because it's really tough.
We can reconcile the language between what you have and what I have. That'd be the easiest way to do it.
We're going to have to do it right here, right now.
Well, let me, Mr. Simpson looks like he has something to say. So I'll recognize Mr. Simpson real quick.
Risk of helping you lose momentum rather than gain it. Councilmember Downing, I would suggest that the primary resolution appropriate policy direction that you're asking the rest of your colleagues to join you in is valuing the lost electricity. I think the tax levy amendment has addressed, along with the fiduciary language, has addressed the primary goals, understanding it doesn't address it specifically like you've proposed, but as a staff person looking at the resolution, that's the primary thing missing from the amendment that's proposed at this point, or the one that has already been passed. Perhaps that's the amendment to be offered at this point. I would suggest that the other items in here are better able to be understood and acted upon by the community and the stakeholders and the staff. If there is going to be a memorandum of understanding, a management agreement, resolution of some type for this private-public partnership, and I would suggest that you may want to consider that this type of language would be included in that public-private partnership understanding of okay, whose parts are what, who's paying for, how are we planning to do this? But I will draw out specifically, I do think there is a policy amendment that's not been addressed anywhere else, and that's this idea of replacing, that was not discussed in detail by the committee. I don't believe the committee thought that was the goal, was to try to recoup it, other than they had indicated the dates that were used, the 2040, 48, in part, were to try to address this electricity investment. That 2040 was 50 years from the 1990 investment. The thought was that was kind of the capitalized or understood useful life of that $1 million investment. And so I think in the sense the committee had done that with that no earlier than the 2040 date. They tried to address that particular point. So it's up to the council how you want to address it. Certainly, Councilmember Downing, you're in order to offer any amendment you want. But I just suggest, as a staff person looking at this, trying to understand what different policy direction you might want to give us. Most of this is understood in the language that's already proposed. The main thing being, staff wouldn't read, as the amendment stands now, that we need to do something about the electric loss, unless there's an amendment.
Okay.
Are you saying, may I?
Yep.
Mr. Simpson, are you saying that, just so I understand, that the 2040 date, you just stated that was seen as the 50-year lifespan, as I said earlier, but also that took into account this the projected hydroelectric power revenues in some way? I didn't quite catch what you were saying there. So
I think the sentiment there was that in order not to lose the valuable, the investment into the hydro generation, you would want to operate the Junction Falls.
Okay.
And in other words, there was sentiment at the committee level that even if somebody produced a check for $20 million to the city, they were not prepared to remove Junction Falls now. That there needed to be a time for the community to say goodbye to Lake George and to the, not to mention the practical implementation of an extremely complex major public works project. It looks easy in video games, but it's not that easy in actual implementation. So, again, the dates were there, and you've got my memo, and you've heard me say this before. I think if I'm trying to summarize, if you move the dates to 2025 or 2020 or something, then I think there would be some argument by the committee members that you're losing the sentiment that we were wanting to recoup that revenue. And now Councilmember Downing, as I understand it, is saying if we're going to take the dam out earlier than the 2048 or 2040, I guess is the way it was written in the resolution, that we want something else other than time to replace that. So that's how I understand it. Again, it's easy to summarize what the discussions in the committee were.
Thank you. I understand that better now.
Okay.
If I can follow up then, Mr. Downing, if my amendment, if I added a sentence after the city and stakeholder organizations will form a public-private partnership to seek funds for this and other river corridor projects, any loss of hydroelectric power revenues for the time period earlier than 2040 would be part of the public-private fundraising effort. I'm paraphrasing now. I haven't quite got all that language in my head. I'm just trying to get this idea across to you. You know, basically what I'm saying is if we can recoup those costs outside of the levy and outside of the taxpayer base from that 2035 to 2040, basically after 2040, we're probably going to be spending more money on these hydros than we're going to be getting out of them because of the end of the lifespan of the mechanicals. So if we can focus on that 2035 to 2040, if the project takes place earlier than 2040, any lost hydro revenues would be raised outside of the tax levy and brought back into the city as part of the public-private partnership fund.
So to put that into a what-if scenario, if
Yeah.
it comes out in 2037, the public-private partnership has to come up with 3 years of revenue.
Right.
That's calculated by some method.
Right.
That we can
in
determine.
his amendment, he said the best guess expected life, or,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So, you know, we'll leave it up to our staff. to
Mr.
figure
Downing, how
out.
do you feel about that?
I think that's a step in the right direction. I guess, you know, I could agree to the 2035, if we can honor that amendment.
Yeah.
And the original, what was that, for the Powell Falls?
2026.
That's 2026.
In the original, that's our current, but
If we can keep to the parameters that are put in this amendment with what you added, I would agree with the dates that you have talked about, yes.
okay. All right, let me get it right, or I'll let other people talk then.
So,
Was that a proposed?
I think we have a friendly amendment on the
amendment?
table here.
Okay, I'll second the friendly amendment.
okay, so we have a friendly amendment that Mr. Watson offered and Ms. Odine seconded. All right, so just for clarification, because I think I heard Mr. Downing say that he also wants Powell Falls to move out to 28, not 26. Is that right?
I can work with 26 if they can honor my amendment,
Okay.
this amendment here.
Okay, so we're gonna leave Powell Falls alone. That's okay. I don't wanna get lost here. Okay, so can you, I'm sorry, did you have something to say, Mr. Gagne?
No, good.
No.
I just want to make sure that because we have an amendment, or we have a first and a second on his, and then there's an amendment within that.
I was just about
Correct.
ready to ask
Okay.
Mr. Watson to restate his amendment as
Thank
amended,
you.
his amended
All right,
amendment.
we'll get it straight here. Thank you.
Ready, set, go.
I didn't want to, I'll have to think very clearly here, okay? So my current amendment reads, the city will take, we got the targeting a time period from 2035, so no change there. If the trend, no change in that sentence. The city and stakeholder organizations will form a public-private partnership to seek funds for this and other river corridor projects, no change to that. Add a sentence. Any hydroelectric revenues projected from the Junction Falls Dam, which may not come to the city due to acceleration or city during the time period of 2035 to 2040 due to acceleration of the
Elimination of-
elimination of the dams shall be part of the funding brought forward by the public-private partnership.
And I think on that elimination, it's not elimination of the dams, it'd be the dam use, because we're gonna have to do the drawdown, which will probably not.
Right.
So
I
we'll have to
understand
clean
that.
up that language, but that's the basics of what is being said.
And just another point of clarification, those revenues would not come to the city general fund, they would go to the utility fund, if I'm correct. Is that correct, Julie?
That is
Yes.
correct.
Yeah, so they would actually go to the city, to the
Utility.
utility fund, because that's where those funds are generated and that's where that expense is held today.
So note that in the amendment.
Okay, okay,
So I'm good with that.
okay. So that's the amendment that's on the floor.
Question though on that, is 2040, and I know that's what you compromised to, but is 2040 a fair date to the citizens, knowing that what we're looking at is getting a 30-year license, which would take it to 2048, that you potentially could? I know what Alderman Watson was saying, that, well, 2040 is when it could start wearing down the turbines and that, but, so there's still the chance that you could collect electricity after 2048. Maybe it won't be as efficient. We're getting a license to 2048. Do you do a compromise and say it's that any revenue that could be collected up to, say, 2044 and split the difference?
President?
Yeah, thanks. I think that would require a, oh, I'm sorry, I recognize Mr. Simpson.
Again, but it might.
Go ahead.
All right. This will take some trust from the council, understanding you're all on the record, so we understand. I think we understand most of the positions that have been stated here. Perhaps just one sentence being added would address what you're trying to do, but it will require you to not try to dive into the detail of exactly everything, given we've got, I think, plenty of context.
Okay.
So I would suggest that the sentence would be, the public-private partnership will address projected revenue loss from accelerated dam removal, period.
I like that.
Okay.
Without any date.
Yes.
I think the
It's just clean and
PPP, I think the
simple. That's
fine.
PPP can figure out.
So we've got sentiment, we're in that spot. Now, City Attorney, I gotta ask you a procedural question, or maybe parliamentarian. We have a friendly amendment and we have an amendment. Can I bundle those two together and act on that, or do we have to take action on each separately?
You've got Mr. Watson's amendment on the floor now. He's offered a friendly amendment to address comments of other council members. I think that you're in order, and now with the clarification of the language from the city administrator, I think that what's on the table right now is Mr. Watson's amendment with the one sentence added in as Scott just read.
Okay, so we only need to take one vote, is my point.
This amendment.
Of this amendment, and then we gotta go back to the original motion.
This amended amendment.
Offered by Watson and seconded by O'Keefe, and they've just
Changed
essentially
it.
revised their
Okay, all right.
Mr. President,
Go
though,
ahead.
do we have any problem if we don't put a date down to when that revenue would be collected? Because could somebody come back and say, well, you took out the dams in 2038, so the revenue is done, so there's no lost revenue? Or could somebody come back and say the argument, well, that you licensed is 2048, you took them out in 38, so now there's 10 years of lost revenue. So do you need to put something down there?
I guess yep.
I think that may be another thing, maybe in the memo of understanding with a public-private partnership as to what exactly the mechanism would be for that.
Right. So there'll be, I mean, not
There
trying
will
to
be other
there'll be
opportunities.
arguments at that time or discussions?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Mr. President?
Anything else? Mr. Gagne?
So I'm in favor of the added sentence. However, I'm not in favor of the shortened time frame. So if we bundle it together, I can't be in favor of the amendment.
Well, the amendment is the amendment.
Okay.
So you'll have to vote according to
Yep.
whatever
Sounds good.
the total part of the amendment.
Thanks.
Anything else? Okay.
I just want to make sure we're keeping that first sentence in there that says the city will take necessary steps to remove the Junction Falls facilities and complete associated stream restoration, targeting a time period from 2035 to 2040.
Correct.
So if we're not putting a date on the revenue, why are we putting a date here?
Because that's the amendment.
Ask your administrator.
Okay, Mr. Simpson, go ahead.
You can provide a target date for both, or neither, or one or the other. It's a policy direction. So I think the question, you have to answer that question yourself. I'm suggesting that there's context aplenty for us to go forward with additional implementation steps that are required. Again, the main reason for dates to be included is to provide some understanding when we work with FERC, when we do a settlement agreement on the licensing, when folks are working with fundraisers, I think the reason I didn't suggest a date in my language is that I think they will determine a methodology for figuring out when, how, and if, and how much it should be compensated for and whether they do that. But it'll rely on you trusting each other to do that. And then, frankly, this is all an exercise in the community's accountability, right? So we all have to hold ourselves accountable for the vision and direction we set, and we keep moving that direction as a community. And if the community determines that it doesn't want to go that direction, you all know they have the ability to change that direction through formal and informal forces. So the beauty of the process that we've gone through so far is really to build that coalition and that shared understanding of what the community wants to go forward with. And perhaps there's a different council member, Bjork, 15 years from now, bringing up minutes from this meeting saying, well, I think this is what they were, just like we were talking about 1989 at this meeting. So there's a record and there's an understanding. That's why I don't think you need to put a date in that because I think the public-private partnership is also not an easy, quick thing to do. It's going to require a lot of discussions and maybe even negotiations about how things are all going to set up. And I think now we've got some foundation from council members about what you think should be in the draft so that when we bring it to you, you'll approve it. So staff will we always endeavor to try to follow the lead of what's been set in front of us.
Well, then I guess then all the more with what you just said there, Mr. Simpson, I think considering we said 2035 to 2040 on the targeted removal, we should say then targeting of revenue of 2040 to 2048. That way it gives a span, but a place to start negotiating, knowing that it can't be less than that and it can't be more than that, but at least now you have a time frame. So I think that only makes sense with the direction that we already started in this resolution.
I'm ready to vote on the amendment.
As
if
what?
anybody else is. At the amendment that I've put on the table. And I'll say a few last words here. I've been involved in city government for quite a long time. I've seen, and I've never seen this level of engagement and enthusiasm for an issue that came before the council. Yes, it's controversial, but the people of River Falls are doing their absolute best, I think, to make it easy for this council to do the right thing. And I want to say thanks to everybody out there who's been a part of this effort. Our job with this resolution is to take the input of the Corridor Planning Committee and to put it into the broader context of this wider community participation and apply what we've seen during this community process. We also have to consider what's financially responsible and what's within the constraints of our staff resources to manage these potential projects. I believe that my amendment to the target dates for removal of Junction Falls during the period of 2035 to 2040 and the motion to move to create a public-private partnership to lead the funding of the dam removal projects is a responsible compromise. The Junction Falls mechanicals will reach their end of life. They're 50 years during this time frame. We've talked about all of that. I think that the 2035 to 2040 timeline gives us an opportunity to learn some lessons from the Powell Falls Dam removal in 2026 and to apply those lessons to both the funding and to the engineering challenges that are going to be present in the Junction Falls dam removal. So I think this time frame isn't going to please everybody, but I think it's reasonable. I think it's doable. I don't think it's going to break the bank. And most of all, it brings the community and all the organizational players together into a positive and constructive partnership moving forward. I can't emphasize that enough because this city is not going to be able to pay for this by itself. And if we don't have everybody out there on board, working with us and being a strong partner, this is going to be very difficult for us to pull off. So I'm confident that we're doing the right thing for our community to adopt this amendment, and I'm committed to making it work. I'm glad for the suggestion that came from Mr. Downing. I appreciate that, and I respect you for bringing that forward. Look forward to working with you on that in the future. And I urge everybody here to please vote yes in favor of this language to amend Section 5 as we have on the table.
Okay.
Quick comment.
Okay. Go ahead.
I just want to thank Councilmember Watson for listening and working with the rest of the council here. I think we're looking at a step in the right direction for the city. I think we're looking at good compromises tonight. I would urge the rest of the council to adopt the dates that Watson is suggesting and putting it into the language I've drafted. And with that, I'm prepared to vote.
Okay. I think we've expended the conversation pretty well. I think everybody's had an opportunity to have a conversation. So, so now we're going to vote on Councilmember Watson's amendment that he has put in the packet and has read back to us with also feedback from City Administrator Simpson.
Can I just read?
Includes Alderman Gagne's language too with the.
Alderman Watson, or Alderman Downing.
About his 15,000, or we haven't got to, we haven't got to that point.
We haven't got to that one yet.
Yeah, that's right. All right.
We still got
more. That'll be added into there yet.
Council President Morissette.
What's that? Yes.
Can I read it exactly?
Yes. Why don't you read it so we all know what we're voting on?
For the record. So Section 5 will be replaced with the following language. The city will take necessary steps to remove the Junction Falls facilities and complete associated stream restoration, targeting a time period from 2035 to 2040. If the trend of ecological conditions of the Kinnickinnic River has degraded to a point where there is a need, where the need for this project becomes more immediate, an earlier date may be chosen. The city and stakeholder organizations will form a public-private partnership to seek funds for this and other river corridor projects. The public-private partnership will address project revenue loss from accelerated dam removal. Any future hydro or dam-related expenditures over $5,000 shall be brought to the Utility Advisory Board and City Council for review and approval.
Okay, so that's the motion in front of us.
Can I ask one other quick question?
Okay.
Facilities, is that the building as well?
I would have to assume it is.
So we'd be getting rid of the power plant building?
No.
I don't know that that's.
That's what I'm asking. I'm wondering, is that?
No, that is the hydroelectric mechanical operation and the dam itself.
I just want to make sure. So historic?
Yes,
Okay.
I totally, I'm
Okay,
with you on
great.
that.
All right, we're going to stop discussion now, and we're going to vote. So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay. So I heard 6-1 with Mr. Gagne voting no. All right, now we got to go back to the original, we got
Gagne's amendment.
Mr. Gagne's amendment that was handed out.
So it's going to be.
Let me find it here, Mr. Gagne. All right. So I will turn the mic over to you. Go ahead.
So it's going to be in the same Section 5. The only thing that I would be mending is the last sentence. Currently it states, any future hydro or dam-related expenditures over $5,000 shall be brought to the Utility Advisory Board and City Council for review and approval. As I noted earlier, one project that we had that was for $10,500 to go in and essentially do an oil change, put it lightly. It was a contract of $10,500. It ended up going over and was $4,394. I could see situations arise in this situation, and do we really want every single thing to come back before the utility board at their next meeting and then have to be noticed and put in publications and within the time frame, and then have to come back to the city council as well? I think, on the practical side of things, getting some more information on this earlier. Currently, our procurement schedule states that anything over $5,000 for hydro and maintenance facilities goes to the Utility Advisory Board, department head, and division head approval. Anything under general purchases of $25,000.01 and 50 up to $50,000 would go to administration. And then anything over $50,001 in the city would go to the city council. So obviously we're in a high process, Kinney Corridor process, where we're looking to remove some dams in the future and restore the Kinney. So I think that $50,000 limit that comes to the council is probably a little high. One thing that I've brought forward would be to change it from anything over $5,000 would still go to the Utility Advisory Board, but change the amount for it to come to council to $15,000. Like I mentioned earlier, any time that the Utility Advisory Board gets an agenda for their meetings, it comes to the council in our email or packet, depending on how the council member wanted it. So if there was a $5,000 one item on there and a council member wanted to intervene and come to the Utility Advisory Board meeting or bring it up to the bigger sphere, they can do that. There's nothing that says they can't, and it could get put on an agenda by the mayor or 2 council members. In this case, I'd make an amendment to change the wording to any future hydro or dam-related expenditures over $5,000 shall be brought to the Utility Advisory Board, and anything over $15,000 to City Council for review and approval.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor and a second by Councilmember Odine. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the amendment as proposed by Mr. Gagne, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, any other motions or amendments that we want to put forward tonight? Have you had enough, or is it time to vote on the big one? Okay. Having heard none.
Wait a second, Scott. Mr. Morrison. Is this still, was this part of the original then? Or?
Well, I think we addressed the concerns, and I think, as Mr. Simpson pointed out, we're going to probably take those things and bring them into the public-private partnership.
Okay.
That was my understanding.
That was mine as well.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So forward that, and I think, yeah,
All right.
we'll move with that later.
And I
All right.
appreciate the council for working with and finding a good compromise here tonight.
Yep.
For everyone involved in the process.
Okay. All right, so the original motion is still on the floor that we have to act upon. We have a motion and a second. Mr. Watson made the motion. I think Ms. Odine, did you make the second?
I believe so.
Okay, so we're back to the original resolution as amended. That's in front of us. I don't know that we need any more discussion, so we're going to move to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. That's done. Okay? That was good work, folks. Okay.
I'll never stay.
All right, now for the really exciting part of the meeting, I hope everybody stays for. We have the administrator's report. So if there's any questions for...
Wow, look at them
That's
get up and
next.
go now.
Comptroller's is coming next. So the administrator's report, anything for Mr. Simpson? In the meantime, we'll let him give a quick overview.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions the council might have.
I've got a question for the clerk.
Let's give them a second to settle down and move out. If you're going to move out, I'd ask you to do it quickly so that we could keep the meeting going. No, I got to save that for the mayor. Okay. So if I could ask folks if they're leaving to just do it quickly and quietly, we'd appreciate it so we can get on with the meeting. Okay. Okay, Mr. Simpson, go ahead.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. We did have a pretty icy election here. I think our staff did the best they could with the February 20th weather. We're still experiencing some of that icing on sidewalks and things, but the crew has done a good job of getting things cleaned. I did hear one of you mention that we're going to get more snow, but, you know, let's hope not. But
What the weather guessers say.
That's Deputy Chief John Albert celebrated 25 years with the city of River Falls on January 27th.
Watching from home tonight.
And our snowplow crew was recognized with an Environmental Leadership Award at the February 8th meeting of Freshwater Society. That was for their stewardship in snow and ice control. We get a lot of ice off the sidewalks and streets with very little salt placed in strategic places and pre-treated, and so we've really taken that stewardship. And it's likely that they are nominated for American Public Works Association for 2018 Excellence in Snow and Ice Control.
Okay. Anybody have a question, Mr. Gagne?
Yeah, I have a question for clerk. I know that we have an election coming up. Can you speak to the dates and when early voting opens and closes? And
certainly, our spring election will take place on April 3rd with in-person absentee voting that is held at City Hall beginning March 19th and runs through March 30th from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Simpson or the staff? Hearing none, we will go to the riveting comptroller's report.
Money, this is important.
Yeah.
This is the comptroller's report for January 2018. General fund revenues through the end of January were $1,085,964 and included the January property tax settlement and first quarter transportation aids. Expenditures for the same period were $525,146, or 5% of budgeted, for net of revenues over expenditures of $560,818.
All right, thank you. Having nothing else that the council needs to take up, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
And seconded. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.